I want to begin with you're about to mark your first year of your full presidential term, and you ran on this idea of an iron fist to really go after transnational gangs and the crime in this country. How has the strategy worked so far?
Well, the strategy has worked. We started this plan in 2023, and there are different phases in the plan. The actual phase was kind of like a blitzkrieg and go, head on into the points in the country or the locations where we had the most violence and also the highest activity for drug trafficking and illegal mining. We've worked together with Europol, we've worked together with the United States and with international organizations so that we can tackle narco-terrorism without affecting the economy, without making the whole country stop. And that is the biggest challenge because at the same time, people need to eat, people need to have a job. Yet the young people that voted for me need a plan and hope in their life. So the difficult part is to mix both, and we're doing it.
So after the snap election, 2023, 2024, we saw crime rates drop about 15%. But last year, it was a record for homicides.
Yes.
So how do you reconcile the two? What changed in that time period?
Well, in 2024, for example, 6 or 6.5 out of 10 homicides were of people that had a criminal record. In 2025, it was over 9 over 10. So most of these homicides were gang-related or narco-terrorism for positions. We had captured the heads, we had captured the capos. So the second line or third line were, in local wars. Most of these homicides were people that had criminal records.
So in the past in Colombia under Uribe, he went for this democratic strategy, shore up towns, shore up roads, make sure they're safe. And then you have a different approach in El Salvador with Nayib Bukele, according to the US Treasury Department, where he basically paid off and cut a deal with gang leaders. Would you consider either of these scenarios potentially or strategies going forward?
Our strategy is more similar to Uribe. People that worked or that were part of the Uribe's time have given us advice, have worked with us. So it's not only, I would say, an iron fist. It's an iron fist with a heart. It's an iron fist also with an economic strategy. It's an iron fist with job generation and job creation. So it's not the same as Nayib Bukele's plan. It's more similar to Uribe's plan.
You mentioned the United States is helping you do this. And last month, U.S. Southern Command talked about these joint military operations. What was the U.S. role exactly?
The U.S. role was very important. It helped us identify, because of the technology that the U.S. has, the locations where most...
Target tracking.
Exactly. Target tracking and their intelligence helped us. And most of the operations, I would say all of the operations, not most of the operations, were led by our armed forces with the support of the U.S. It's not an invasion. It's not an intruder coming to our country. It's actually international collaboration against crime.
Would you welcome, though, U.S. troops on the ground?
If they're willing to follow the lead of Ecuadorian armed forces, then no problem.
Do you think the U.S. would be willing to do that? Have you had those conversations?
Yes, I mean, they're willing to collaborate. They're willing to collaborate. It's not follow orders, it's collaborate.
Last year, in a referendum, though, Ecuadorians pushed back. They rejected this idea of foreign military bases. Could you still have U.S. troops on the ground without having this idea of foreign military bases go through a referendum?
Yes, we have international agreements, international treaties that allow temporary presence of, obviously with the control of our armed forces, but it does allow that. At the same time, 70% of the country is happy that we have a good relationship with the U.S. So sometimes numbers or a referendum can be irrational in a way.
It sounds like you're open to this and the US is open to this. Do you think it could happen maybe this year?
I think it could happen this year. I think it would be important. Right now, we've reduced homicide rates by 38% in the border. There's a general sense of peace today in Ecuador. Our numbers are a lot better. And we are at a point that we need to continue pushing to eliminate the threat.
Have you spoken to the new Secretary for Homeland Security? Because I know you were very close to Kristi Noem, but now there's a new individual, Mark Wayne Mullen. Any conversations between your government and him yet?
I haven't talked to him yet. I've talked to Secretary Hexet and the Department of War and Secretary Rubio, but I haven't met the new Secretary of Homeland Security.
As you know, of course, the U.S. now is dealing with a war in the Middle East and Iran. Are you concerned that their direction of travel, their focus is shifting to the Middle East and not to Latin America?
No, I think that the U.S. understands that most of the drugs go through Latin America up to the States, and it affects the lives of young people in America. It affects their future. It affects, the stability of their families. So it's better to attack the problem from the source than to wait till it crosses the border.
What about the effects of the war? Are you feeling that here in terms of energy prices going up?
Not yet. We're starting to feel it. We have a system that is partially subsidized in terms of fuel cost, and it can only go up by a certain percentage every month, but it will catch up. I mean, this is the reality of the world. But we're an oil producing country, so that helps us also in terms of income that we need it.
The diesel fuel subsidy, though, was removed. Would you consider bringing that back?
No.
No, not on the table.
Not on the table.
You're a very close ally, obviously, to President Trump and the Trump administration. He shared this morning, this tweet, Truth Social post. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. Does this kind of rhetoric make it challenging for you to align with this administration at home?
It is hard. What I focus on is on the willingness of a government, of the willingness of this U.S. government to finally go after narco-terrorists in our region. Maybe the form is not ideal, but the true intention and the plan, I think it's a good one.
The destination. You talk a lot about transnational crimes. Actually, all the cocaine, 70%, comes from outside of your borders, but it leaves from your borders, which makes it very challenging. How do you work with your partners in the region when you have a fractured relationship with some of them when it comes to Colombia and Mexico? Does it make it challenging to go after this one specific issue?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. We have to double our presence in the border, in our northern border. It forces us to spend money that we wouldn't have to spend if our neighbor would care about protecting their own borders and control trafficking. So it's an extra $400 to $500 million a year that we have to spend to control that. That's why we have now a security tariff for Colombian products coming south.
Is it working, the tariff?
It's working. In the first quarter of last year, for example, we had a trade deficit of $250 million. This year in the first quarter is 8.
I cover the president, so you sound like him when you talk about tariffs, using a security issue but slapping tariffs. He's a self-described Mr. Tariff Man. Are you modeling this after him? Are you Mr. Tariff Man of Latin America?
No, I believe in commercial openness, and the economies should work together, but fairly. I'll give you an example of Colombia. In 2017, they had electricity issues, and we helped them so that they wouldn't have blackouts. What was the cost? 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour. In 2024, we had the same problem, and they charge us 28 cents kilowatt hour. So That's not necessarily fair. It cost us $400 million that were supposed to go to social programs, that were supposed to go to opportunities for young people that voted for us. So things like that make it difficult. What would be ideal? To cut defense deal, energy deal, and eliminate all tariffs. That would be ideal. That was our proposal to Colombia, but Colombia didn't want to make any deal in security or in electricity.
When it comes to Mexico, because you have severed diplomatic ties, last year or the prior year, you said something along the lines of you're going to get a ceviche or have some tacos with President AMLO. We now have a new president in Mexico. Does the same deal hold for her? Would you consider dining with President Sheinbaum and maybe working this out?
Sure, no problem. I have great friends in Mexico, classmates also that I went to school with, and I think it's an amazing country that has a huge potential, and it should also have the same willingness to have a good relationship with all of Latin America.
Do you think your relationship is becoming better with Mexico?
I don't think so, but I think that they're focusing more on ideology than I am. I'm focusing on security.
They did get a huge cartel ringleader in February. Potentially, does that show you that they're lining up with how you think as well about?
What they did is that they blocked the entrance of a cartel leader that came from Colombia with a Colombian new identity. So it was more an immigration issue. It was more an immigration issue. Then that person was sent back to Colombia and then back to Ecuador.
When it comes to Latin America, the U.S. is also focused on this region, not just for transnational crime and the gangs and the cartels, but also when it comes to China. Have they asked you to choose between Beijing and Washington?
Well, not directly, but there are some suggestions of some people from the government. But at the same time, I keep on answering the same thing. Our number one partner in terms of security and defense is the U.S., but we continue to trade with all countries.
And Chinese investment actually is outpacing that of the United States. Does that make it more challenging to become a China hawk?
In the last, I would say 10 years, yes, but recently the U.S. is catching up. Recently the U.S. is catching up in Ecuador particularly. I can't speak of the other countries. And we see U.S. companies more willing to work with Ecuador in the energy sector, in the mining sector, in construction, and in trade, in general trade.
You were born in Miami, went to the most prestigious universities in the United States. Has that shaped your worldview and how you view policy in Ecuador?
In a way, yes. In a way, on how to solve problems, but the best way to understand Ecuadorians is to spend time with Ecuadorians and to spend time in different parts of Ecuador. Ecuador is multicultural. It's 24 different provinces, a lot of different characteristics in each region as well. So the best way to understand Ecuador is to spend time in Ecuador with Ecuadorians.
You also come from the richest family of Ecuador. You could have had a very calm life. I look at these guitars around the room. I mean, you could have just continued studying music, maybe be in a band, but you decided to be the president of Ecuador with a target on your back from gangs. Do you feel safe?
I feel confident. I feel safe, but I have to be careful every single day of my life. And it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice I made. It's a sacrifice my family is making. And yes, I could have an easy life. But at the same time, I had the example of my mother, of my father, that both had, this sense of service, especially my mother. She was the most voted congresswoman in the history of the country. She has her own foundation. She's a doctor. And I just, feel that I'm doing the right thing now and using the resources and the education and, the blessings that I have in benefit of others.